Hi, welcome to Bookmark. I'm your host, Don Noble. My guest today is author, lawyer, crime novelist Robert Bailey. Bailey is the author of a dozen novels, most recently novels starring the billboard lawyer, Jason Rich. I spoke with Robert Bailey in Studio UA in the Digital Media Center on the campus of the University of Alabama. Bob, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
We had a chance, after living in the state at the same time for decades, we had a chance down in Monroeville to spend some time and become acquainted, and that was fun.
That was a whole lot of fun. Really
Yeah.
a neat experience.
That's a nice conference and brings people together, and everybody has lunch and talks and so on. At that time, you gave a talk, which was, I didn't know what you were going to do when you got up in the courthouse. I thought maybe you'd read from a book, but instead you sort of told the story of your life. And I'd like a chunk of that now. You are an Alabama boy and you went to law school.
I did. So I went to law school here at the university, graduated in 1999. Before that, I went to Davidson College in North Carolina.
Right.
And grew up in Huntsville.
Davidson is, not everybody knows about Davidson, but it is one of the great ones.
Davidson is a neat place. You know, Davidson is now famous for being Steph Curry's, where he went to school. By far the greatest athlete that ever played at Davidson of any sport. But I loved it. It was a great place for me, small school. And my last semester there, I got to take a little creative writing class that sort of prompted some of my writing journey.
Well, there's no reason that this would have touched you at all, but a lot of English professors in the Southeast who went to graduate school at different places have BAs in English from Davidson.
Right.
They usually married queens.
That's
girls
right, yes.
From down the
Davidson
street.
was a all-male school for a while, and so all of the date function type things were with queens.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting.
The guys I knew.
It wasn't when I was there. But.
Well, I knew several guys who had been through this process, and it was interesting. When I was at Chapel Hill, they had all graduated from Davidson. It was horrible to say. They'd graduated in '63. They'd all been ROTC. They'd all gone in the Army for 2 years and got out. 65, 66, so that they didn't have to go to Vietnam.
Wow.
So we were all students together, and they were vets, and I wasn't. After law school, your father was a lawyer.
No, my father was a builder. He was a builder and a general contractor, developer. He had a lot of professions, but that was what he mostly
Jason's
did.
father.
Jason's father. Jason's
lawyer.
father was a lawyer in the Rich books, yes.
Well, you went up to Huntsville and practiced law.
I did.
And what
Yes,
I
sir.
read is that you practiced law for 13 years before you commenced writing novels.
Well, what happened is I was practicing for 13 years before I published my first book. But when I got back, I started thinking of the idea for the professor while I was in law school. Kind of a smart aleck idea at the time. You know, what would happen if a law professor actually had to try a case? And it sort of developed from there into, you know, what would happen? And I started thinking about it, developing the character, and read Stephen King's book On Writing, which was a big inspiration to me and so many others.
It's really good.
It's just a great read. Yeah, he got autobiography the first half, and then his toolbox the second half for how to write, and it sort of set me free to just give it a shot. And so I did, and it took me about 8 years to write what I thought was something that might be publishable. You know, I really kind of taught myself how to write just by doing it. First draft was like 800 pages. It was awful. My mom read it.
Well, I'll tell you, this is not literary, but when I was a very young English professor and badly paid, really, really badly paid, actually $9,300 a year, we would all gripe that the law professors were paid twice as much. And we would be told by the dean or some administrator, the reason for that is that if they went out into private practice, they could make a lot more. And we were very skeptical. This is a question. This question ultimately
Right.
is whether these ivory tower law professors could argue in a county court down in Hale County
Right.
or up in Madison County. You seem to think yes.
I do. I mean, I had some wonderful law professors at Alabama, and I think they all would have been fine lawyers. I think at the time that I had the smart aleck idea, I was probably not doing great in that class and daydreaming a little bit. And so, but I did think it would be neat for someone who'd been in the classroom for a long time to sort of return to the courtroom and have all of the juices flowing again and that kind of experience.
Right. Well, he gets in trouble.
Right.
He's accused of the kinds of things he's accused of. Usually humanities professors
Right.
are accused. I mean, it's all kind of financial and sexual misconduct.
Yes, he's completely framed by someone that he thought was his friend, and it spirals kind of out of control for him. But
well, he defends him. It's the other thing that I took from that book that I kind of enjoyed was you went to the trouble to explain the laws, the interstate, the national interstate highway traffic truck laws.
all the trucking regulations.
Trucking regulations.
Yeah, I spent some time on that. Earlier drafts had probably too much of that, and my early readers, particularly my wife, was like, "Do I have to read any more about trucking regulations?" So I really did kind of scale that back some, just to make it authentic, but not. You never want to bore somebody.
It is one of the things I read a lot of novels, and one of the things that happens a lot is the novelist has learned a body of knowledge, and it could be the cooking habits in Afghanistan in the 4th century. It could be anything. But once the novelist knows it, the novelist wants it all in the book.
Wants to pound it home. That's right.
I got to use this. I went to a lot of
It's a
trouble.
vanity thing, I think, and that's one of the editing things is to take some of that out.
Well, the professor, that became a series finally of 4 novels. The other novel of yours that I read and enjoyed not terribly long ago was The Golfer's Carol, which I thought, well, obviously was reminiscent of It's a Wonderful Life. A guy is suicidal,
Yeah.
and he gets to play golf with
Right.
famous dead golfers.
Yeah. So that story was was one of those stories that was very personal to me. My dad was a golfer. My dad died of lung cancer in March of 17. My wife had lung cancer at the same time, and so did not have time to really mourn my dad. And so my wife's surgery was a month after my dad's death. And so while you sit in all those uncomfortable chairs in the hospital and you have a lot of time to think, and I started thinking about this story of a way to sort of mourn Dad and celebrate Dixie, and The Golfer's Carol is what came out of that. I wrote the story for myself, really, but it really makes me happy when people sort of get the story and it means something to them.
Yeah. Well, because I knew we were going to have this conversation, a few days ago, I actually had business with my lawyer. And so I had here in town, and I said, how important is golf to lawyers?
Right.
He plays at the yacht club.
You're right. Yeah, great course.
Yeah, and he said, well, he looked very reluctant to tell me how much business.
Golf is one of those social games that you really it's a fun game. You learn a lot about people when you play golf, just the emotions and the frustration, and it's definitely a game that you can develop relationships that maybe turn into business or even personal friendships. So.
And there's always the 19th hole.
And there's always the 19th hole. That's
where
right.
Things, more personal business will be accelerated.
Exactly.
Well, those are, you have a bunch of books before the rich books, but the rich books are the subject of the day. Not very long ago, you published the 3rd in the series, Rich Justice. But let's go back and talk about the creation of Jason Rich.
Sure.
We don't have to mention any names particularly, but you've made him into Alabama billboard lawyer,
Right. Right.
whose billboards are everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, my father-in-law was an attorney, and he was of course older and very conservative and staid about this kind of thing. He had no use for that at
Right.
all. What happened? Or you did consult, you did figure out the ethics of it?
So it's interesting you said that about your father-in-law. Jason Rich's father in the story has similar sentiments, and so I think as a lawyer in the state and a litigator, I would travel a lot, and so I always keep a little notebook of ideas. And the idea for the Jason Rich series came from just seeing so many of the billboards, and they're everywhere, not just in Alabama, but Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and different slogans. And I remember one of my kids asked me what my jingle was, because there was a lawyer in Huntsville that had a jingle and had a billboard, and I just thought it was I thought it would be neat to write a story about a character, get behind the billboard to who the person is, put that lawyer in an out of his wheelhouse situation, which in this case, the first Jason Rich book is representing his sister in a murder case, and so which he had never done a criminal case, and that was a fun way to explore the character.
But the crux of this, the hinge that has to be there, is that his name is actually Rich.
Yes, I chose Rich on purpose because I wanted it to look good on a billboard. And I did do a little research. I called my friend at the Alabama State Bar's General Counsel office, not wanting a yes or no answer, just saying, hey, if I were a lawyer in the state and I wanted to have a billboard and my last name was Rich, could I do in an accident, get rich, or injured, get rich? And he was like, it's pretty close, possible. And I was like, all right, that's all I want to know.
I think the place to stand is that his name is Rich, because then you can always step back and say, well, this is true.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it's the plate on the back of the Porsche that attracts my attention more than anything. Rich lawyer buys Porsche. Vanity plate reads, "Get rich."
Get rich, exactly.
I mean, that is edgy.
He is, Jason Rich is a fun character. He's tacky, he's a narcissist, he makes mistakes. And I didn't know that. I really was worried that characters weren't going to like him after Tom McMurtry, who's so stoic, and Bocephus Haynes, who's such a tough lawyer. And Jason is really none of those things when you first meet him. It's a growth series and a redemption series for him, where he's sort of, by saving these people he represents, he's kind of saving himself. He's got problems, alcoholism, and he sort of works through that by working.
There is I don't know if Stephen King actually says this literally, but one of the procedures in a lot of novels is create a character and then throw rocks at him.
That's right. I mean, you really have to have conflict in these stories. I get reader messages sometimes, why can't you let Jason be happy? And I was like, well, then you wouldn't read the book.
Well, to begin with, Jason's sister is arrested, accused of murder.
Right.
So he's going to represent her.
Exactly.
Even though he's not done that kind of criminal law.
They have an estranged relationship at first. She doesn't even have his phone number, but she knows how to reach him, because everybody in the state of Alabama knows how to get a hold of Jason Rich. You just call 1-800-GET-RICH, and she does, and he reluctantly takes the case.
In that book and the two that follow, there's an immense amount of drugs. Drug sales, drug networks, methamphetamine labs, or all that. And, I feel very sheltered.
Right.
I mean, it's real. I mean, it really is a huge problem out there.
I think, I don't know how huge a problem it is, but, Sand Mountain is a wonderful place. I have a friend from Marshall County that helped me some with this book. He's like, Sand Mountain is 97% one of the greatest people in the world, and then there's that 3% off the grid outlaw folk that sort of that gets written up if you Google it. And so I think that I do sort of take advantage some of what a reader might already think about that place, and then I really try to be authentic to it. It's just, Sand Mountain is what I call sort of a literary gold type setting, because some readers will already come to it with sort of their own thoughts of it, and then you add a little spice to it and I try to show real people and then the bad guys, and so.
One of the things, in the most we get everywhere eventually, but these are not small-time let me back up a step. Sand Mountain, they're two in your book, and in reality, there's sort of Pappy and Mammy Yoakum, and then there's Lake Guntersville.
Yeah.
I mean, they're two very different places, aren't they?
The beauty of the setting is that Marshall County and Jackson County, those counties are so different. Like Marshall County, you've got Guntersville, Arab, Albertville, Boaz. The four towns, if you're in any one of them, it doesn't feel like the others. And so they're distinct and unique. Guntersville's that quaint sort of Fairhope on the Lake type setting.
Yeah.
And the lake itself has got danger, it's got beauty. You know, it's a great place to watch the sunrise. It's a great place to hide a body. So it really is tailor-made for fiction. And so if you have been there, I think it's an Easter egg for a reader. If you haven't been there, it's an escape to someplace new.
Well, I'm sure this is part of your conscious procedures, but it is somebody like, what was his name? Tyson Cage. I mean, there's a serpent in what looks sometimes like Eden. Right. I mean, that part of Sand Mountain is beautiful.
It's gorgeous, yeah.
And then there's this arch villain, this real monster.
Right.
Heartless, meth lord. But something that struck me in more than one of the second book and maybe the third book, stronger maybe, is it seemed to me almost corporate. That you talk about how there was a turf war.
Right.
There was a civil war among the meth dealers about who's going to be the boss. But it's corporate. They have branch offices.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I took creative license with a lot of that.
Sure.
And just fictionalized it and tried to create something that would be interesting. And so by the third book, I've got this universe and can play with it a little more than maybe I did in the first book. Tyson Cade is a younger villain than I've ever written, and sort of this demagogish type figure that's risen to the ranks, much older probably in experience than he is in years. And he has garnered this really tough reputation, you know, deservedly so, for being a smart, ruthless leader.
But you have fun with this because, on the one hand, we know that he is heartless, but he has established a kind of, it is this guy, isn't it, who has also established a reputation as Robin Hood.
That's right. He is.
How does he do that?
He's a master manipulator, you know, and that's part of his charm, is that while he is, you know, in reality probably a sociopath, he garners admiration and even affection from the people around him by sort of taking care of the folks that are in his group. Like in the second book, Rich Waters, he's really pulling all the strings. You know, he hooks up Trey Cowan, who's in his circle, with Jason Rich, you know, a really good lawyer. So he's on the surface, he's taking care of his own, but is he really? Under the surface, is he really?
Well, he's poisoning them, for one thing, with methamphetamines.
Yeah.
But he provides rent money or food money.
He takes care of the clerk's mother who's in a nursing home, or payments and stuff. So things like that to sort of basically own people.
And you see it as cynical.
A little bit, not completely. I think these characters are gray. You know, I think that you know, they're not. I mean, Tyson Cade has sort of I do try to set out his backstory in the sense that it is a kind of a tragic backstory where he's lost his mother at a young age, and he's a scrapper, and he's scrapped his way to where he is.
Right.
So you don't have to like the villain, but I do think you have to put enough in there to where you kind of understand how bad he is.
Well, how would you like this as a generality? Everybody in these books has, every closet has a skeleton in it.
Yeah, that's true.
These characters, in any given book, there are half a dozen characters, and every one of them has some awful secret.
Backstory is always kind of something that I've enjoyed as a reader, and so planning little things like that, skeletons, so to speak, has been one of the fun parts of the writing process.
I have difficulty believing that a lot of the boring people I know have any secret worth knowing. In your books, they do. Well, you bring poor Jason Rich. When the third novel opens, I've rarely seen a hero, a protagonist, more down in the muck. He's back to drinking. He's estranged from everybody. He has children, right? And
he has his nieces who he's been taking care of, but he is estranged from them. At the beginning of the book, the only people really in his world that are still with him are the brothers that live across the street.
Oh, they're wonderful. They're wonderful. They're the Army.
The Tony Dandle brothers.
They're creations.
They one of the magical parts sometimes of writing is the middle of Rich Blood. Jason was getting wore out by Tyson Cade, and he just didn't have the skills to deal with him and his, as you said, his network of meth dealers. And I literally have him walk across the street because the Tony Dandle brothers are taking out the trash, Marshall County style, which means they're burning it. And he starts talking to the colonel, and the magic kind of happens, and they become part of the story, and then by the end, by the third book, they're like his family.
Yeah, and there's an element in your novels. We have not known each other all our lives, but you do not seem to be like a violent person. No. Nor in your biography do I see Navy SEAL or any of that stuff. You won't. But there's a lot of violence, especially in the third book.
There is,
explosions, gunshots, arson, murder of every kind.
Right.
That you have to learn that.
I think it's just got to. Each story is different. You know, Rich Justice has a lot of that. The Final Reckoning, the last Professor book, McMurtry book, is more violent than the others. I think it really is story driven. And I think by the time we got to the third book in the Rich series, it's truly an all-out war at this point. Yes. And he's got soldiers with him, like the Colonel Tony Dandle. And so I think if they're going to declare war on us, then it's going to create these violent moments. And I always try to make them interesting and not gratuitous. You know, it's got to be part of the story. It's got to feel right. Well, there's got to be some other elements besides just,
Well, those two guys, the Tony Dandle brothers.
Yeah, there's three of them, and then
Well, they're wonderful, and they make the violence sing, because you believe them. If Rich were conducting the violence, you think, well, maybe not.
No.
But these guys know how.
They know what they're doing.
Two more questions for you. One, I never asked this question because I have found it to be, over the years, really boring. But in your case, I'm going to make an exception.
Right.
I've stopped asking people about their writing habits. But these books are 500 pages each.
Right.
How many hours a day do you work?
So, at first, I would write in the morning from 4 o'clock in the morning until around 7, and then I'd get ready and go to work. Now, years later, as a published author with deadlines, and where they buy the book before I write it, I still follow a morning routine. I did stop practicing in January, so I'm a full-time author now. I am a mediator too, so I can mediate cases, but that is a little more synergetic with the writing, not quite as stressful, and so it's kind of a ramp up. It's like, for me, it's almost like reading a book. Like the first 150 pages, I'll slog through them a little bit. I'll stop and start. I'll change some things. and then I'll get to around 150 or 175 and I'll see the end. And then it's just, to me, the biggest buzz for a writer, for me, for my writing, is when I can see the end, I know where I'm going,
That's it.
and things are happening, and that's when I don't want to stop. And so I wouldn't say it's a very balanced approach. I will, once I get to that point, I'm really,
it's a lot of words.
I'm all in.
Well, the new one is 508 pages or something like that. All right, Rich Justice came out 6 months ago or whatever?
Yes, sir. It came out in June.
6 or 7 months from now, you have another one.
I do.
What's coming?
So The Boomerang is coming. It is a political thriller. I call it sort of side B of my family's cancer journey. Side A was The Golfer's Carol. Side B, The Boomerang. It's a conspiracy theory book, you know, when you're in waiting rooms, waiting for results that are going to define your life, and your wife's life, your dad. You hear conspiracies. People talk, they're nervous, and the thing that I kept hearing was there's got to be more, and if there was more, would the government let us have it? And so in The Boomerang, the government is hiding the cure for cancer. A chief of staff to the president figures this out. He blackmails his best friend, the president, steals it, and runs to New Mexico with it, where his wife's very best friend is this John Dutton type, Tony Montana, Michael Corleone figure who is giving them protection. The government's afraid of them. The publisher pitches it as Grisham meets Yellowstone, which I think sounds pretty cool.
Well,
I hope it lives up to that billing.
Two big winners.
Right.
Well, we'll be looking for Little League ballparks named after you soon as time goes along. Well, I will be looking forward to Boomerang.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed these. They're really fun, and my heart bleeds for Jason Rich, except for the money.
Right. The Boomerang is really more of a family. At its heart, it just asks, you know, what would you do for the ones you love?
Well, you get going with that, and you will. It's done.
Right.
When it comes out, and I hope we get a chance to sit down and talk again.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.